Imagine if you could achieve unparalleled growth in your manufacturing or technology company, driven by high performance teams, refined sales strategies, and a rock solid plan that aligns every part of your organization. Welcome back to the Manufacturing Connector, where we spotlight the solutions and strategies transforming the future of manufacturing. I'm Jim Mayer, and in today's episode, we're diving into the unique world of growth coaching with Helene Smuts, founder and visionary behind Credo Growth. With her extensive experience helping tech and manufacturing leaders build cohesive, high-performing teams, Helene has developed a powerful approach that brings together people, culture, and strategy to unlock true potential. Credo Growth doesn't just provide advice, they're hands on partners who tackle the real challenges, everything from cultivating a culture of accountability to implementing world class sales processes that drive lasting results. If you're interested in deeper stories behind industry leaders like Helene, you'll also enjoy my other show, the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, where we explore the lives, motivations, and experiences of the people shaping this industry. But going back to Helene, today she will walk us through Credo Growth's innovative service pillars, share actionable strategies for integrating high impact teams, and offer insights on how companies like yours can reach the next level of sustainable success. So if you're ready to see your business transform, let's get started with Helene Smuts from Credo Growth. Hello, Helene. Welcome to the Manufacturing Connector. How are you doing today?
Well, after that intro, I'm flipping fantastic. Thank you. Yes. I'm like
I
sitting
love
here,
it.
like, I'm standing here and I'm going, I want to shrink you and put you in my pocket. And when I go and do a pitch for a client, first blow you up again, and then you do that pitch, and then I continue talking. That
I
was
love
brilliant.
that. I love that. I will come hype you up before any pitch or any presentation you do. TED Talks, whatever you're into, Helene, I'm here
Yes.
for you.
Yeah, I'm going to
Uh,
actually spit that out and send that to people that we're waiting on. So
Absolutely,
thank you for that.
absolutely.
That's great.
I'll send you the file when we're done.
Yeah.
Um, Helene, really happy to have you here. Really excited. You and I have been chatting for quite some time now, and it's great to finally get you on the show. Talk about what it is you do. We're kind of kindred spirits here. I
Yeah.
feel like I am looking at my twin here, minus the beard, of course. So, Helene, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are now, and how did Credo Growth come about?
Yeah. So I think what's probably very important for me in terms of my background as to where I am. I grew up in a minister's household. So my mum and my dad both were ministers, as was all my uncles and grandparents and all of those things. So I've always grown up in a house where my dad was involved with supporting people with it. And that back then
Mhm.
it was couples or
Yeah,
friendships and the congregation and things like that. So that's kind of how I saw them being, as helping other people, especially people in conflict and disgruntled with themselves and things. But
sure.
I was always raised to be a good employee. I was, I was never. I always remember my dad saying, "Remember, you need to do everything what will make other people proud." And what they will be proud of, and make people make it easy for people to work with you.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the background that I grew up in. Um, but I then in varsity I first studied travel and tourism, and I finished my we in South Africa we call it a BCom degree. It's like a commerce degree in
Okay.
travel and tourism. Worked in travel and tourism also for a few years. And I was studying full time as well in order to go into my honors and things like that. And that's where I landed in industrial psychology because it was one of my majors.
Got it.
Absolutely loved it. Never made the link between me loving psychology and doing what my and knowing what my parents have done. I just thought it was my brainwave, but it really wasn't. Um, and yeah, then the one thing went to another. Started a coaching practice because I did a coaching course and personality profiling. Met a phenomenal lady from Germany who was here to open a South African sister company of one in Germany, which is a consultancy. So the
Okay.
two of us joined forces. So we merged our two businesses, opened that, and I was there for 11 years.
Wow.
Shareholder, MD of the business, really focusing on growing it. And that was the first time that I also got to work with auto manufacturing businesses, which was amazing.
Sure.
Still working with them today. And yeah, for a different type of podcast as to why I exited the business. But eventually, in 2019, for specific reasons, I kind of parted ways. I've sold my shares, exited. And then I started Credo Growth because I still had very much a passion for people development. You spoke about high performance. The high performance part was a big drive for me, and
Sure.
not high performance at the cost of everything.
Mm,
Like the integration of how you work and kind of how you are being with people, plus then executing on the high performance side.
I love it.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, and then Credo Growth happened, like I opened in 2019. I think I wrote my book, Ditch Mediocrity, in 2020, in midst of COVID.
Okay.
Um,
That's a
so
good use of your time.
yeah, I think so. And it's certainly paid off, I can tell you that. Um, yeah, and very excited. In 2024, we opened our offices in the USA.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And so, where is your office here in the US going to be?
So it's registered in Wyoming, of course, because it helps for foreigners. Um, but we work a lot in Ohio, also because of the manufacturing kind of concentration.
Yeah.
And majority of, like, for example, our facilitators and things are based in Atlanta.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And I spend a lot of time between the US and here, obviously meeting with Emily, who's also one of our facilitators. So yeah, it's a work in progress and really, really enjoying the journey.
That's amazing. And I will say, and we can have more of these stories on the other show because Helene will have her own episode on the Manufacturing Culture podcast because we got to hear more of that story. But you have done a lot of traveling, and I've really enjoyed every time we talk. You've got some amazing story, your photos behind you. Like, tell us about, yeah, that one right there is amazing. Tell us a little bit about that side of you, the lust for
Mm.
travel that you have, and how that shaped what you do.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's no surprise that I started off with a travel degree. Thinking that
Right.
if you study travel, you're going to get to travel. It's like, no, you still have to work hard. But anyway, um, I think it's the curiosity piece.
Okay.
Um, and my husband and I, we love traveling to off the beaten track kind of
Hmm.
places, similar to what that, I mean, that is 30 meters or 12 meters down under the ocean, um, very off the beaten track. But it's really has shaped my curiosity, my compassion, and my understanding for how people are different and different cultures. And how some people can still get things done, even if it's not the same way that I want it done. Because my personality is one that is quite direct. But
Yes.
it's yeah. So from a young adult phase, if I can call it that, that travel bug has always been there, and it's pushing me to not get comfortable. Like for
Mm.
example, the image behind is we went free diving in Greece, and you have to dive down for this is without oxygen for anyone who's not very aware of freediving. You have to dive down for 7 meters, and then it's a 25-meter slab that you swim under, and then then you're swimming into a pitch black cave, which for me is intense. I know as
Yeah.
professional freedivers that's absolutely fine, but and I had a panic attack because before I had to go down, and my
Oh.
husband came back out again, and he knew I needed to completely understand how many seconds is going to take me to go down, how many like seconds or half a minute or whatever the case might be is my swim going to be under that slab. I just needed the information. And if you had put me in that situation a few years ago, I probably would have never done it. So if you ask
Really.
me about the travel and how it shaped me, it has it's instilled curiosity, compassion, and just a sense of adventure. And I think we bring that into Credo as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah.
Awesome.
I
I
don't know if
love
I answered
that.
your question. I got excited about the photo.
Yeah, so did I. And we're going to have you on the other show for sure. And we got to hear all of those stories because I want to know if you've ever skydove and how diving under a rock is comparable, like in that fear,
Yeah,
uncomfortable factor is. But let's save that for the other show. Think
for the
about your
other one.
answer. Yeah, let's save that for the other show. So, Helene, you have brought with you today a pretty robust deck. I haven't seen it, but I'm really excited to. I really want to just dive into that because I think this is going to encompass a lot of the success stories that you've had with some of the manufacturers here in the US, as well as
Yeah.
a pretty robust framework. So let's dive right into that.
Yeah. So I think what my wish is for many manufacturers is what we've rolled out with one of the manufacturers in Ohio. Not only there, we also rolled it out here in South Africa with our clients here. But it's been such an amazing journey to see. It's a manufacturing business from about 450 people. They
Wow.
have staff or employees in Newport in California. They've got a big office in Texas, Houston, Texas. I don't know if you say the state first and then the city, but Houston, Texas,
Yeah.
and then also of course in Mason, Ohio. And I mean, I will share kind of the foundational model that we used, which is a very well known model, and there's nothing innovative about it, but it's how we used it that I think landed so well. And it started off with us working with the CEO or the president of the business and his management team. So we
Mm,
first upskilled the management team, and I'll go to the slide now. And then from there, when we had their buy-in and they actually started giving each other feedback, then did we start rolling it out to the rest of the business. Every single person from the president all the way to the very last person on the second shift on the manufacturing floor has received that training. So
wow.
that was a real big invest in your people
Yeah,
kind of drive.
absolutely. Before you dive into this, Helene, I do want to ask you one question about something that you just said that I think is really important. You
Mm,
said that this isn't novel, right? This isn't necessarily a novel approach. And I think that a lot of people who do what you do, who do what I do, we don't necessarily always have novel approaches. There are really proven approaches that
yeah,
are time tested. And, but I think the most important part of what you said is that it's the delivery of that message, of that content, of that framework that if
yeah,
it's not delivered correctly, it doesn't necessarily always land. Is
yeah.
that your experience in this industry? And by industry, I mean more of the consulting coaching
Mm,
side of things versus the industrial side, of course. But
mm,
I think that goes for a lot of different frameworks, whether it is manufacturing processes and lean and things of that nature, or leadership or high performance teams. A lot of this is all already been defined. We're just repackaging it in a way that we find is a little bit more easier digestible.
yeah.
Is that your
It's absolutely spot on. I think what happens with, I don't want to slant other consultants, but
right?
I think
Exactly.
that's not my intention here. But I think what happens with people who doesn't get a growth partner that fits their culture, let me say it like that, it sounds way better,
Yeah.
um, is that the tendency is to stay extremely academical in
Mm,
rolling out different culture projects. Um, or they stay very much in their headspace and they don't translate it into practical implementation for the people. So people will
yeah.
sit in workshops, they will do different interventions. They walk out of there, they go, okay, this is fantastic information, but how must I implement this?
You can cuss on this show.
And I think that's also where one of our brand promises is it is easy and practical to understand and implement. And everything that we do, and I know there's other growth partners out there that also does incredible work, but that's for us is the most important thing. Use something that we know is going to work. We've often used models and we've completely rewired it because it doesn't make sense for the client. But what does make sense is how we rewired it, because now it's about their culture and how they want to implement it.
Yes.
So if there's a tool or a model or a process out there that's already working, tweak it in such a way that it makes sense for the type of business that you have. You don't have to necessarily copy and paste it exactly as is. It really is to be molded. Of course, there's psychological principles behind certain things that is sound, but for practical implementation, you really have to wrestle with some specific tools and models. Sorry, that was a very big monologue.
No,
around.
I love it. That answers it perfectly. And I think it puts it in perspective for people, right? Because there
Yeah,
are a lot of different things. I mean, you can't scroll through LinkedIn without seeing a different framework or a different model or a different X, Y,
exactly.
and Z. But it's how does your culture, how will your culture adopt that framework, right? So you have to find the right
Exactly.
framework for them. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
And I think this is a very perfect example. I mean, I forgot to put Patrick Lencioni there. It is a Patrick Lencioni model, just for so that everyone knows. um, but
I've
we've
got right
used.
down here the big book, and then
Oh
I've
yeah,
got
there you
the
go.
small books up there. Yeah, I love
Yeah, no,
Lencioni.
he's a legend. I like, if he's listening, I want to meet you.
Let's
Yeah.
make that happen because I've been saying the same thing, and if he's listening, I will fall out of my chair when I find out that he heard this.
Yeah, well, we'll tag him in your link when you post this.
I will post this clip and I will tag him and see if he can.
Cool. But so we've used this as our baseline to introduce what feedback does and where feedback comes from. And also, I mean, Patrick Lencioni speaks the same language here, is that companies and teams struggle a lot with the fear of conflict and the avoidance of accountability.
Yeah.
Um, and what we did with this manufacturing business is we landed the concept of what it does. We first obviously got the top tier involved, and they are giving
Mhm.
each other feedback. And I'll share with you a tool that they are implementing now, which is really cool. And then we rolled out skills training. So first, understand understand this model and understand where you are in your team.
Mhm.
Then we also looked at what does feedback do and what is the mindset around feedback, and creating it as feedback is a gift and it's not a threat. And it sounds very simple now, but you can imagine the process that people need to go through. And the
Absolutely.
realization of the reason why we don't want to give feedback is because we don't know how.
Yeah.
And what if we give feedback and someone gets angry at us? So that whole concept we work throughout the organization.
I
And
love it.
then what we did is we actually created a space, facilitated space, where people gave each other feedback on the spot. They didn't get time to plan it, to think about how they're going to sugarcoat this message. So they literally had to learn on the spot. And then this was an 18-month process. Um,
Wow.
and then after that, they had to go and do team feedbacks. And in their huddles on a weekly basis, they had to speak about the different, where did they get feedback from? Who did they give feedback to? And then, of course, linking feedback to the values that they have as a business. And it
I
fitted
love it.
perfectly into each level, each value that
Yeah.
client had.
Love it.
So it's been a phenomenal journey. And about a month ago, we started rolling out what we call the fishbowl feedback process, which is my favorite thing in the world. And that is where I actually had to make a video for them in terms of how to implement this, and they're busy rolling it out now. But say, for example, it's me, it's you. We've got Liz Shovlin, who I've chatted to recently,
Yeah.
and a few other people in our team. I'm the fish in the bowl. Then you get an opportunity to give me feedback in front of everyone else. And then it's Liz's
Interesting.
turn to give me feedback in front of everyone else. And so it goes. And then it's your turn. Then I give you feedback again. So it's called the fishbowl effect. and it takes a lot of time, but the team connection that comes from that exercise is just insane. But it takes a lot for it takes a journey for people to change their mindset around feedback. So
Absolutely.
that was
Well, and
one thing I'm really proud of what we've rolled out so far.
I love that. It's got to take a lot of trust in that team between the team members, and that's one of the things that I love about Lencioni's model is you've got to have that trust to start. But how do you get to that point where people feel comfortable
Mm,
and feel like there is that trust? Uh, I work with a lot of different organizations that I've tried similar things, and this is for my own edification. I might edit this out. I don't know. Um,
vulnerability
but
based trust.
absolutely. But I have, in a couple of instances, tried to do things. I implemented a failure award at one of my clients where it was intended to be something that was fun, lighthearted, that celebrated the ability and trust that exists to make mistakes and empower people to make them, because
Mm,
you've got to be able to make mistakes and learn from them and move on. The culture wasn't strong enough to do anything other than self-identify on those failures, right? And
yeah.
then even then the trust wasn't there where people felt comfortable saying, I failed, I did X, Y, and Z. So how do you build that trust? It's a long way to get to my question, but how do you build that trust so those fishbowl conversations work?
It's not a short-term solution, if I can call
Right.
it that. It really takes time. So like I said, this has been an 18-month journey. But
Okay.
the way that we started it is we got every single person in that management team to actually live this, and they had to show how they do not take sensitively to feedback before
Got it.
they can expect their team members to give feedback to one another. Because by this, it's cross hierarchical feedback, right? It's not just
Yeah.
manager to team member, it's
Yeah.
up, it's lateral, all of those things. So they had to showcase that behavior first and learn how to hold the space and learn how to have these kind of conversations of, I want you to give me feedback, and then showcase that behavior of how I deal with it when I receive feedback. So that
I
was the
love it.
one thing. Quite the journey for the managers to showcase the behavior.
Yes.
Um, the second thing that we also did, and we're still continuing doing that, and actually that takes me to my next slide without you even knowing it, is we did intact team developments within this business as well. Um, and you can imagine team developments. Sometimes we do team developments because they just want to maintain their beautiful team culture and they don't want to lose something. They just want,
Right.
to connect better and things like that. But other times there's teams that really struggle, and the trust is they predictable trust or operational trust is there. Like, I know that you are going to do what you do when you say you're going to do it because I've worked
Yeah.
with you before. But that vulnerability based trust wasn't there. And so you can see here that this was their scores in an automotive industry for the procurement team in the States. That that's what we had to start with in terms of
Wow.
trust, as an example. And we started doing small little activities. And again, I think a lot of people say, let's go out, do a 2-day retreat, and everything's going to be hunky dory. That's 2 days of high energy, a week of motivation afterwards, and then it just, it goes down. So
Yeah.
it's continuous smaller interaction sessions, facilitated sessions with the team. It can even be cross-functional teams, because you can imagine procurement needs to speak to finance, HR needs to speak to payroll, and all of those things.
Yeah.
But so all of those small interactions are then guided through, let's increase vulnerability based trust. I mean,
I
there's
love it.
different activities that you can do. I've got little fun cards where it starts at a very shallow level of questions that you need to answer, and then it goes extremely deep. Um,
Interesting.
And we share those cards and activities, and there's lots of stuff. Personality profiling. It's
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, you know that very well, around how to start sharing about what I like, what I dislike, why I'm wired the way I am,
Yeah.
understanding how different people work and how they execute on tasks. So it really is about building on these levels. So what
Yeah.
we often do, once we had a team together and really spoke through what's working, what doesn't work, and have very, very tough conversations, and they can have it because it's facilitated.
Right.
um, we then do a journey of, right, now for a session or two sessions, we focus on vulnerability based trust. Then only do we move to having passionate debates and the ability to lean into conflict and actually adding intelligence to a pool, changing your mindset about what conflict is.
I love it.
And then, I mean, this has been a 5 month journey, and you can already see the results, how it shifted. And
Oh,
I actually, funny enough, I had a meeting with her 2 hours ago, and they're continuing the journey even further because they don't want to lose momentum. So if you ask me, how do you build that trust? Slowly but consistently, but you have to be strategic around how you do it. It's not just a
eh,
blanket approach in terms of, oh, we need to trust each other, we need to go for drinks and have an amazing race as a team building kind of. It's actual structured conversations that needs to happen. Yeah.
and if I'm hearing you correctly, it's got to start at the top, right? And it's got to have that full buy-in from, and not just buy-in, but also living that change, that mindset change, that vulnerability, that building of
Yeah.
trust for it to catch on below. Because I think that the example that I used, I think that was my problem. Was I had the leadership team who were willing to say the right things, but not live it on a day in, day out basis. So that when it came time to have these failure awards, there wasn't that trust because nobody had been living that thing that we had been talking about for 18 months at that.
Yeah. And also what made me think, or what you made me think now, is in a different team that we used. What
Oh
was
my
very
God.
interesting with them, this was also an 18-month journey, if you can see it. We started in April, where they didn't even want to be in the same room. Their scores
Wow.
don't necessarily show it, but the amount of kind of psychological safety that needed to be created in that room was intense, because their operational trust was very high, but they couldn't get to, because there was gossiping, and it
Mm,
was me against her. It was holding grudges with one another. And the interesting thing is, in the middle of the journey, their scores actually dropped instead of increasing. I'm like, what the hell? Almost like a failure point. And we unpacked
interesting.
it. And they were like, no, 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 we can feel the difference. But the reason why the scores dropped is because our expectations of one another are now higher.
I
And
like that.
that was an amazing, I mean, I wish I thought of it because I would have felt better before I went into the session. But they were like, no, like this, it's because we expect more from one another right now than what we did before.
Yeah.
And I mean, they now, I now do sessions with them because they enjoy the process instead of the fact that they need to be together. And that was, so you said it needs to come from the top. Absolutely. Everyone needs to showcase that behavior, but there needs to be a willingness from everyone to show up.
Yeah, I had to just sit and let that resonate for a minute because that might have been your mic drop moment of the first 30 minutes of recording here. That was really powerful, Helene. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. I'm quite passionate about that.
Oh, I can tell. It comes across. We've never met in person, but your passion
Yeah.
definitely comes across here. All right, so moving on, this is all about conflict in teams, right? I mean, this is how you were able to build this. Um, how did you work through those problems and solutions and really coach these teams?
Yeah, so I mean, there's there's many different ways of doing it. I think the one was we were very hands-on, and that's kind of also how we work. We work very closely with the leadership team, the president of a business, in smaller teams, the founder of the business, and say, what type of culture is it that you want? What are the values? What are your strategy? And how do we link with that? So there's a very, very close kind of relationship that follows. And then it's not just about doing a workshop and then you step out. Then it's working with the leaders in the team to help them to showcase this behavior and to help them to get the best out of their people.
Yes.
And I think, again, it wasn't necessarily part of this feedback culture process, but what we also then do is we teach them how to lead with a coaching mindset so that they can bring, and I know everyone talks about engagement and, you know, but it's true.
Yeah.
Like how do you get people to be engaged and to be a high performer? And I think, I'm sure your listeners would have either said this themselves or have heard this, but everyone coming and say, don't come to me with problems, come with solutions. Like I hear that so often. And it's like, it's fine. It's great to expect that, but teach them how to come with solutions. Don't just expect
Absolutely.
that of them.
Yeah.
I also see it in generational differences, hey? That different generations starting to think differently. Some personalities are a little bit more on the shyer side and they're waiting. They're not disruptors, but they are responders, if I can call
Yeah.
it that. So what we often do is we take managers and especially people who are leading others. We take, I mean, again, it's a whole journey that we take through, but just to the essence of the model is we take them through a model by Sir John Whitmore. Again, it's a model that has been around for ages,
Yep.
but it's about how do you apply it practically.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah.
and it really is about teaching them how to lead through coaching instead of jumping to the conclusion for the team member, because then you can stand on your head. They're never going to come with solutions. They're always going to come
Exactly.
with problems.
Yep.
It's it's almost like a parent-child scenario. If you're always going to give the solution, the child goes, but then I don't have to think for myself because I can just ask you. It's easier. you know?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I found that, Helene, when I was leading one of the teams that I in a company I was working for, I had a woman who worked for me, and she would call me 7, 10, 12, sometimes 15 times a day, every time a problem arose. And it was super painful for me because I
Can
couldn't get
imagine.
anything done because every 30 to 45 minutes my phone was ringing, and just that breakup in my task delivery is tough in itself. And I found myself getting more and more frustrated, but eventually I started asking her one simple question, and it was, how do you think you should solve this? Or what do you think is the best way to solve this? Right? Instead of me giving her the answer every
Yeah.
time and saying, go do X or try Y, how do you think you could solve this?
Yeah.
And I'll
No,
tell
absolutely.
you, that ultimately led her down the path where she started to feel more confident. And what I realized about that moment was, it wasn't that she didn't know. She wasn't calling me because she didn't know how to solve these problems. It was the baggage that she brought with her from her previous company, where
Yeah.
she felt she had to ask the questions every time something came up. So when I
Yeah.
started doing that and saying, hey, how would you solve this? All of a sudden, my phone calls start getting smaller on a daily basis. And then ultimately, we got to a point where she would call me once a week and she would say, hey, here's all the things that happened this week. Here's
Yeah.
how I solved it. Here's the mistakes that I made. Here's what I learned from making those mistakes. And here's what I'm going to change for the next time that problem comes up. So
Yeah.
instead of literally 50 calls a week, I went to one that was like
Yeah.
30 minutes long. It was amazing.
And I think there's a misconception around coaching because people see this model and they go, oh my goodness, I don't have time to go through this. I honestly, I've got too much on my plate. This is ridiculous. It's just easier for me to quickly do it and implement it. But then
Yep.
to your point, then you need to do it 17 times a week,
Yeah.
which is a lot. Where if you can have one question for each of these steps.
Mm,
And that's a 5-minute coaching conversation. They don't even know that you're coaching them. And you
exactly.
reduce your 17 calls to one call a month, or potentially a brainstorming call instead of just depending on you for information.
I
So
love it.
this concept of coaching takes time. Of course, more complex scenarios, deeper emotional issues, of course it takes time. But there are scenarios where in your very first question, like what you just said, in terms of how can you solve it, where you're putting back the responsibility in their hands and they can act like their own adult. They don't have to go into a child mode that just
Yeah.
takes orders. I remember, sure, this was quite a while ago in my previous business. My assistant at the time came to me and she was starting to do our books. And she came to me next to my desk and she said, "Look, the books aren't balancing. Not that I know anything about numbers, but anyway, the books aren't balancing." And before she finished her sentence, I took the two papers from her. I looked at it and I pointed out where the error is. And she looked at me and she said, "Thanks. I actually just wanted you to ask me a few questions so I could figure it out myself." And I sat there like, "Oh shit, I'm really sorry." I'm like, that's my failure, right? My fail
Yeah.
moment, the failing award.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's exactly that, establishing the goal. Like, what would you like from me? You're coming to me. What is it that you need from me? Just that one question
Yeah.
takes
And
2 seconds.
I think a lot of times as leaders, we come to the table with tool belts on, ready to solve problems. And we
Yeah,
don't ask the very simple question, what is it do you want from me in this, right? Do you
yeah,
want advice? Do you want direction? Do you want just somebody to listen to you? I think that asking that kind of question changes the dynamic so much. And I think
yeah.
that's what you were just saying.
It it's again, as you're saying it, what comes up to me, it's almost like we have a hero complex. Like we need to be the one with the answer. We need to be the one that says, "Look, I gave it to you." Which is, if we
Yes,
can get rid of that responsibility and go, "It's not about us. It's not how we would solve it." It will reduce a lot of stress and give you a lot of time
absolutely.
back. So the reality phase that's my favorite phase. That's the unpacking part. So this is where you get to ask all those different open kind of questions. We always say it's questions to take the person around the advertising pillar. I don't know if you have. So it's a pillar that has many different
Oh, yeah,
advertisements on the
sure.
pillar.
Yeah.
So you walk them around it so that they can see the pillar from all different angles. So it could be things like, how did you add fuel to the fire? Or if she was sitting with me, what would she tell me about the scenario around how this played out? If I wasn't here and no one else was in the office, what would you have done? So it's
Wow.
really those kind of questions. But a part of it, the kickstart of this, is to say, what is difficult about it? Or what about this don't you understand? Or why do you think you need someone else to give you a solution? So I first jumped to the end part of it and not the beginning, but the beginning part is, what is difficult? Why is this an issue for you? Who have you asked before? What have you tried?
Yeah.
So it's basically unpacking. And every single time you listen and you reflect back to what the person has said and you ask another question, you're allowing the person to process, or as you will say, process, but you're allowing allowing the processing to take part for that person. And when there's processing, that of course is when your brain is able to move things aside and box things and go, actually, this can be a solution. And that's the biggest indicator, is if you've moved to options too soon, the person will struggle with to come up with a few options. And
Mm,
that's an indication that you need to move back to reality.
got it.
So it's the exploring phase, and
Yeah.
it should be the largest part of your conversation. Um,
Wow.
the
I love
important
it.
part is not about, and that's the big mistake that people make, um, and present company included, especially when it comes to my kids. But it's the you should, you must, you have to, have you tried, what
Yes.
about? Those are all advice giving, if you think about
Right.
it.
Yes.
So it's important to stay away from that. But then the transition is, okay, so you've said X, Y, and Z. You've mentioned this is how you have made it worse or what you've tried. What are the different ideas that you have had or that you want to try and explore? Then you start working through that. And once they have all the ideas out, then do you go, okay, so pros and cons of each idea, which one do you like, what don't you like? And then you move to, okay, what is it that you're going to be doing? But again, you only need one question for simple conversations, not the
Yeah.
complex things. One question per area, and the person will be able to work their way through it.
I
The
love it.
problem is what we do is we go from goal to instruction, and we call it the management shortcut. And actually, all we're doing is we're removing someone else's brain power. We are
Wow.
we are excluding their ability to think. And we're basically saying, what you think is not relevant because it's about what I think and my solution. That's the beauty behind this, is if you can get
Wow.
that someone else is starting to think for themselves, decision making, problem solving. And that's why people thrive, because like, yo, I've got autonomy in my role. So yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. That's super powerful. I love it. What's next?
I think what I'll do is I'm gonna jump to something different that is not necessarily on the team side and people working together, but maybe on the team alignment side, because I know there's a lot of businesses out there that have these incredible strategies, but they really struggle to get those strategies executed. So
Perfect.
what we do a lot is we help businesses to identify and kind of steer their strategy. We don't steer it, we're just a facilitator. So we hold the process for you so that you, as the leader, the founder, the president, can actually be in the room instead of having to facilitate the room.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's scale up methodology, there's the traction methodology by Gene Wickman, but it really is about looking at your big, hairy, audacious goal. Some companies do it for 25 years, others do it for 10 years. Us, we do it for a little bit smaller, like shorter period of time, but it is something that scares you in terms of what it is that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And we then work with the leadership team to narrow that down into a 3-year strategy. Because you can imagine if it's this massive, hairy goal, it's very overwhelming. Even a 3-year vision is overwhelming because
Yeah.
people go, I don't know how we're going to get there. And it's scary. And then we start working, for example, with your head of departments to say, okay, this is the 3-year vision. Now let's break it down into the 12 months initiatives of this business.
Got
And
it.
then we move it into the 90-day world. And that's where execution starts to happen, which is beautiful because you don't have to worry about quarter two. Yes, there's certain things that you already need to set up for quarter two, but that's part of your first 90-day world that you are in.
Sure.
And when people live in this 90-day world, it's short. There's continuous huddles, or however you set up level 10 meetings, all of those things. And you can stay in touch in terms of where are we with that. And there's a book called The Five Disciplines of Execution. And they
Yeah.
always say that they speak there's the whirlwind, and then there's your one wildly wicked important goal, which is your wig. So what is your wig, your wildly important goal for that 90 days? Because the whirlwind is always going to be there.
Love that.
So what do you do in order to execute on this and keep, work with all the fires that's happening, but you're still focusing on this 90-day? And then that moves into the team, and we call it the peeps in terms of everyone within the team. And then it's been broken down into actual tasks, which is then, for example, okay, for the week ahead, what do you want to achieve? And that week ahead needs to fit into the month, and that month needs to fit into the 90-day. So it's still people related, but it
Yeah.
really is about aligning across the organization so that people can speak the same language and everyone knows. Go back to Patrick Lencioni's model, in attention to results. You can't get to results if you don't all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
this is just it's more the business way of how we are helping teams to and organizations to grow in the manufacturing and the tech space. And it's we use the Russian doll as the an analogy, because
Yeah.
it goes big and then smaller and smaller and smaller.
So, what do you do, Helene, when you come across a small to medium sized manufacturer whose BHAG or 5 year goal is to simply still be around? Because that's you know that as well as I do. We go into some of these smaller shops, and that's
Yeah.
literally what their 5 year goal is. They're not looking at diversifying or really scaling or growing. They just still want to exist. How do you work with those companies to really develop that BHAG to then go through that Russian doll model there?
Yeah. I think a big part of it is, especially with smaller shops, is to work with a founder in terms of also what is their personal BHAG. What do they
Oh,
want to achieve in, not necessarily just in their shop, but for them as a family potentially, or for him or for her in her career, or in just in terms of life.
sure.
Because then, if that is not aligned with this, then you already, there's like, well, okay, then maybe we need to bring it closer together. So that's the
Yeah.
first thing that we will do. And I think that BHAG for someone might be, in our opinion, really small, but for that person where they are at, that the BHAG of, I just need to survive for the next year, is
Hmm.
enormous, because they already know how they might not survive.
Yeah.
And then it really is about, okay, so if your BHAG is about survival for this year, it's not a 3-year vision. It's immediately a 12-month initiative. How are we
Got
going
it.
to do that? And then you break it down again. So, like I said, we don't follow the 25-year one. Um, that scares me.
Yeah.
And we don't really need to right now, because we we don't want to become a McKinsey kind of
Right.
consultancy, because then, like, we got feedback once, you make us feel as if you are our own, as if we are your only client. I don't want to
Perfect.
lose that.
Yeah.
So I guess my BHAG is maintain that process. But it's each business, and the size of the business will depend on how big is that BHAG and how far in advance. And then you just work with that.
I love
Um,
it.
because there's no point in us telling you what your BHAG should be.
Right.
That makes us the experts in your business, and we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't
and
I
I
don't know
think
if that answers your question.
100% does. And I think what you just said, it's not your job to dictate that. It goes back to an earlier statement you made that I loved, and I was trying to figure out how I could work this into a question, and here's my opportunity. You had said you go in and ask your clients, what is the culture that they want, right? Because again, it's not your job to come in and judge them or to tell them that their culture is wrong or
Yeah.
right. It's your job to ask them what that is. So, how do you get past that perception, because a lot of manufacturers, a lot of other companies, owners have the perception as well that consultants are here to judge. They're here to come in and judge, to assess and then judge. How do you get past that kind of perception so that you are able to have more real conversations
Mm.
with your clients?
I think from our point of view, it goes back to what we said right in the beginning around our deep sense of curiosity.
Okay.
Um, so that is the first thing. It's really, really curious as to what's going on for the business, what's working, what's not working well, sharing experiences and stories from other industries and similar
Mhm.
industries that client is in terms of what we've seen worked and doesn't work. But we very much based on treating each other as adults, if I can put it like that. There's a model called
Yes.
parent, adult, child, ego state, and those things. And I think just by our demeanor of how we are being, people are realizing that we don't want to come into your business as the experts, and we don't, because there's so much information and skill
Yes.
and expertise that's in your business. We just need to unlock it. Um,
Yes.
like, literally, we just need to unlock it. And yes, of course, there will be areas where we guide, and especially if we see, for example, a dictatorial style of leading. And they ask us, we don't understand why people aren't responsive to us, or there's disengagement.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
and I think people appreciate that. It's not this soft, gentle, safe language. It is, this is this is what we observe. This is the feedback that we can give you. This is what you said you want and what you need and how things used to be, but you've lost your way. And
Yeah.
here's how we can bring it together. I think just because of that approach and the not, we sometimes can be seen as maybe a little bit too pushy, but we do say things as it is, and not try to mollycoddle around it. And I do know that there is often people who struggles with having tough conversations because they're worried about how people are going to perceive it. That they can struggle to create that connection between clients, and almost then become the advisor and the teacher instead
Yes.
of the growth partner, if I can call it that, to work with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I didn't mean to cut you off from your presentation. What else did you have to
No, I was
share
done
with
on
us?
that slide. We
Okay,
was just
perfect.
about it. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, perfect. So, Helene, as we look at wrapping up this episode, and I know I said I'd have you on the Manufacturing Culture podcast. I think we might have to do another one of these if we don't build our own podcast together
I
here.
would love
Um,
to.
eh, just because there's so much that, and so many different branches I took you off on that you didn't, I think, get to finish everything that we wanted to talk about. But if you looked at one takeaway from today's episode that you really want the viewers of this to take to walk away from and be able to literally implement day one right now in their shop, what would it be?
Oh, can it be a deal answer? If
Yeah,
you say one.
absolutely.
Um, so I think if it's for people who want to take things and implement it in their shop, so
Mhm.
from whether you're the leader, the founder, the president, all of those things, it would be identify how you want people to be in the business. How do you want your culture? And then say, what skills do I need to give to the people so that they can show up like that? For
Yeah.
example, oh, we need a feedback culture. Okay, you're going to train them. No, they don't need training. They just need to start giving feedback. It ain't going to work. It's not going to work. So, so it's about what is it that you want, and then
Yeah.
think about the skills that people need because they don't naturally have those skills to show up in the way that you want them to show up.
Yes.
So that's the one answer. And I think the other thing is, if you are listening and you are a team member, whether you're a leader or any of that, but you are still a team member and you walk into a business every day, is don't outsource. Don't
Mm,
outsource your motivation and don't outsource your engagement. It's rather about show up in the organization so you can make it easy for the people that's leading you, also to coach you and to provide engagement. But I
I
think
love
what
it.
we see a lot is people sitting there waiting to be motivated, waiting to be coached, waiting to be told how to do something, instead of going, hold on, I'm responsible.
Yes.
It's not about who's going to do it for me. It's about how am I going to do it. So those are my two kind of strong messages that I would like to land.
I love it. I love it. There's another mic drop moment from Helene, folks. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head, right? I've worked with shops that I walk in and people are waiting for me to come and do a lunch and learn and feel
Mm.
motivated, or waiting for me to come and do an engagement survey, or a leadership workshop or whatever. And I love that idea that we're all adults, we're all accountable for our own actions. We need to have that motor internally to
Yeah,
wind up, to really make, when I do come into the shop, more impactful, because you've already got that motivation. If I have to start you and get you motivated, then it's going to be less impactful than if you were already wound up and your motors running when I come in and have those conversations. Is that what
absolutely.
I'm hearing you saying?
Yeah, 100% spot on. It's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a be an amazing leader, but be an amazing follower as well. And both sides need to make it easy for each other.
So Helene, outside of the two like big takeaways that you want people to walk away from today's episode with, what haven't I asked you, or what haven't you shared that you want to share, if anything?
Sure. I think, well, a big part would have been the don't outsource your motivation. I
Yeah.
live and breathe that. But I think it really is about, don't necessarily be scared to start a journey, whether you are going to implement it yourself. Just start. And I think that's quite important, is if your passion is there, if you are really wanting to create high performing, high functioning teams, and it's not at all cost, like I said in the beginning,
Mhm.
it depends on your passion and your drive in order to do that. So
Yes.
it's, yes, you can always get outside help, and of course we want to help you, but it really needs to start with you as the person leading the team, or the follower within the business, to start that process and guide it.
Yeah.
It's so crucial, and there's too little of that happens in teams.
Yeah.
That people, and maybe this is also it, is those type of conversations that you are having, and those feedback and tough conversations that you are having because something is not working. It's adding intelligence to the team, to the business. It's not
Mm.
if you don't have those things, you're actually removing information from the team and the business. So
Yes.
you're doing it more damage than what you are when you're actually leaning into this. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Helene, how can people find you? How can they get in contact with you or Credo?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn under
She
Helene
is.
Smuts. So, yeah, it's a very big platform of mine, and then it's also credogrowth.com, and my email address is helene@credogrowth.com. But if
Awesome.
it's not on email, LinkedIn, it's probably the best way. Like I said, I'm quite active.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Helene, thank you so much for joining me, the audience today. This was the start of many episodes. So, everybody who's watching, please let us know maybe what you want our next topic to be about in
That's
the
a great
comments
idea.
below.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do it that way. But I can't thank you enough. I interview a lot of people, a lot of kindred spirits, but not one that literally does the same thing that I do, just better. But somebody that I can really resonate and feel every moment of the conversation. So thank you again, Helene. This has been
Very
wonderful.
welcome. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. It was great talking to you.
Absolutely. And folks, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Manufacturing Connector. Today's conversation with Helene was super important, and it showed us that it takes time to build that trust, to provide feedback. It's not just quick fixes. It's taking those small incremental changes that will create that lasting change. But it all starts with building that culture, that strategy, and really a commitment to growth, that mindset at the top levels. So if Helene's insights resonated with you, or if you're looking to take your business's performance to new heights, check out Credo Growth's website below and consider booking a discovery call with Helene or her team. With their proven track record of driving sustainable growth, Credo Growth could be the key partner in unlocking your company's full potential. And for those of you interested in hearing more about personal stories like Helene's and journeys of leaders in the industry, be sure to tune into the Manufacturing Culture podcast. There we dive into the experiences of industry leaders and uncover what fuels their passion for success. And lastly, before you go, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might benefit from it. I mean, even grandmas can benefit from Helene Smuts. The insights we share here on the Manufacturing Connector are all about equipping you with the tools to thrive in this amazingly rapidly evolving industry. Thank you again for joining us today, and stay tuned for more powerful insights and tools in all of our upcoming episodes.